Welcome to the Bywords Show. I'm your host, Hannah Hughes. Bywords is all about equipping women for purposeful living by starting conversations, celebrating stories, and inspiring faith. In a world that applauds the hustle, I'm here to help you break free from the lies and come back to what really matters. It's time to get real, get rooted in truth, and come alive in relationship with Jesus so you can show up to each day with intention and confidence no matter where you're at in your story. Here we believe that embracing our stories brings hope, healing, and purpose to the process, and sharing our stories helps others do the same. Whether you're looking for a midweek faith refresh, practical tools for pursuing your dreams, or just need some good old-fashioned girl talk, you're in the right place. Grab your latte and let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Bywords Show. Today is the day. I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited today to introduce you to Alexandra Kaval, who is here with us today. And we're talking about a big one, you guys, okay? We're talking about boundaries. And I am really excited for this conversation. But first of all, I have to say, Alexandra, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Hello, thank you so much. I can't wait for this conversation with you.
I'm so glad to have you here. And before we dig into this, I have to ask you our little icebreaker question. We always start off by asking our guests, what has been filling your cup lately? Literally, but also figuratively.
That's so good. Okay. So, what has been filling my cup lately? I would say from figuratively perspective, I we've just had like the best weekends of all time. I mean, we are
Oh.
recording in early February, but January was there. I keep saying there's a lot of life lived in January. And we've just had such a great time with family and friends, and our church family. And I'm just like so grateful for those simple connections and conversations. My word for the year is relationship. So just really intentionally pouring into that. Yeah. And then I'm a tea girl. I love tea so
Ooh.
much. That is always filling my cup. And I'm obsessed with it's like clean caffeine, I kind of say. It's fizz sticks. And so I'll pour some fizz in
Wait,
my
I
tea.
love those.
Do you
I know
really?
exactly what you're talking about. I went through a
Yes.
phase where I was living off of the fizz, and I
Yeah.
still have a stash in my cabinet. It is so good. So I love that.
It's so good. It doesn't have the same crash that coffee does. And it's just like
Yes.
the best clean energy. I'm obsessed.
Okay, well, I love that. And I love that your word for this year is relationships. And I love that you just do what you do. So you're a Christian coach and you
Mhm.
talk to women about a lot of these things, like relationships, but also the overwhelm that a lot of us feel and boundaries like we're going to get into and being multi-passionate. So do you want to just start us off by explaining kind of what got you into this world?
Totally. Okay, so my background, I, like a lot of my clients, am your typical type A overachiever, right? Like, if I'm going to do the thing, I'm going to do it really, really well,
Yeah.
probably as close to perfect as I can get. And then you can tend to also feel the responsibility of needing to do all of the things really, really well. So it's almost like the multi-passionate overachiever and boundaries, like they just all need to play together to operate as effectively as possible. So, all that to say, I was at a point in my life in college where I didn't know what direction to go. I just so desperately wanted someone else to tell me what the thing is. So I spent a lot of time, looking into, well, what could that be? What could that look like? And it was challenging. I initially thought I was going to go to school to become a physician assistant and do
Mm.
skincare. And I got in. And now I look back thinking, oh my goodness, my electives were biochemistry and physics. There could have picked something a little bit more fun than that. But long story short, I went from PA school 2 weeks in there to getting a master's in HR development and spent about 10 years in corporate HR. And then the Lord just got me curious about, well, what if I could do all this goal setting with Him at the center of it? And that's when I learned about Christian coaching. And so it's really just kind of awesome to be able to use all of the gifts and the strengths that He's given to me and see it really come together so beautifully in this way. And I mean, I could talk more about those in a second, but I'll take a minute to pause there, Hannah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I just have to say, wow, I relate so much to your journey because I am also like Enneagram 3, achiever to the max. Like, just want to do everything perfect, want to do all the things.
Mhm.
And then, and I'm sure you've experienced this or talked to your clients about it. It's like at some point, we realize that's not the best option for us long term. We start dealing with things like burnout and we start feeling confused like, Lord, how do I find the right thing? So I love that you talk about that pivot from, I'm in this world. I've got these passions. I want to achieve these things. Like you're driven, you've got the goals, but how do we do that with God at the center? And it's so interesting if you are a woman that is passionate, multi passionate, has all of these things on your heart that you want to pursue and you want to do them well. And maybe you have that perfectionist side going, but how do we start to recognize a healthy way to walk that out? Because obviously, we know there are some not so great things that happen when we become obsessed with perfectionism and achieving and those kinds of things. So, how did you learn to walk this out in a healthy way in partnership with the Lord?
Totally. It took time. It took a lot of time and it continues to be like an undoing and a daily choice. I feel like that you've got to make, right?
Yeah.
And so it's difficult because you are, especially someone who is wired as being a doer, like you are so capable, right? You have such a big heart and you want to use it and for good reason. You see a need and you want to meet it. And especially as a mom, that gets amplified in some ways. But what I would say is thinking about like at what point is your doing shifting from helpful or shifting from, yeah, helpful to harmful? And just
Mm,
getting curious, like, is this coming because it's something that I'm really called to do, that the Lord is asking me to do? Or maybe is this something that I want to do because I need a certain need to be met? And just sitting in
mm.
that and getting curious and uncomfortable. There can be so much fruit there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really real that you brought up uncomfortable because it really can be. Because I think, for me personally, in my experience with the achiever thing and perfectionism, like I want to do it well. And
Yeah.
then sometimes when I hit a wall or I feel limited in my ability to do the thing, or I've got so many things going, I just start to feel that overwhelm. I'm like, oh, Lord, am I missing something? Or why aren't you blessing this? Or why am I not seeing the growth or the success or the things that I thought I would coming out of this? And so I love how you pose that question like, is this helpful? Like, is this productive in a purposeful, intentional way that honors the Lord? Or is this actually harming me? Because I've seen in my own life, there are times when I'm doing a lot of great things, right? Like with good intentions, I'm doing these good things, but I'm not really accomplishing anything that fruitful because my
Mhm.
focus is all wrong. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, totally. So it's like it makes me think of this idea of we like to go and move and do, and you're going in a direction, but are you going in the right direction, right? So, like thinking of almost
Mm,
a boat, right? Like even if you go 1 or 2 degrees off course, like you're going to end up in a wildly different space, right?
mm,
And so just taking some time to sit and to think, well, Lord, what direction are you calling me into? I have something that I like to kind of call lovingly like the 7 F's. A few faith, fitness, function, which I'll say is career, finance, and just thinking, okay, these are the different buckets in our life. And like, Lord, where do I need to focus in these right now for this season, for this chapter? And so, almost like I love a good framework. Having a good framework can be super helpful. But then also, like, big picture, I had heard it said as we're thinking about prioritizing God first, family second, and then business third. And are we honoring that or what is out of whack, right? Like so much of the world and the culture we live in has a complete opposite work, then family, and then God. And so I always
yeah.
say, like, that's a really good place to start when you feel like you did so much during a day, but then you get to the end of it and felt like nothing really happened. And that's a very, very discouraging feeling that a lot of people experience every single day.
That's so true, and I think a lot of women can relate to that, and probably mothers especially, and I mean, I don't wanna blanket statement that, but I have had conversations with a lot of moms who wrestle with that, especially if you are a mom in a season with littles, who their need is much higher in that season, and then you also feel called to these other things, or you feel, like you just have this endless to-do list of things, and when you start focusing on what you're achieving or what you can get done in a day, it feels like you're just running around in circles until you finally get your head on the pillow, and that can be so exhausting. And so I'd love to circle back really quick because you kind of touched on this in the beginning, but this pressure that we feel as women to be everything to everyone all at once. And it's just a lot. Like, where do you think that comes from? And how do we start to let that go?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I would say it goes back to that, just like a sense of responsibility, right? Like just because
Mm,
you can doesn't mean that you should. And getting curious about like what is your highest and best use of time, right?
mm,
Okay, so there's this episode, and I'll virtually recommend all of my clients listen to it. It's the Journey Women podcast, episode 69 on humility. Okay. And it's
mm,
talking about letting God be God and letting you be you. And so just thinking, even in the name of doing something goodly or godly, right? Are we pushing the limits and not honoring our humanity and just taking some time in that too? So that's just something else to speak to. I'm getting us off track. Bring us back, Hannah. But those are just a couple of things that we're thinking about. Where do we focus when you feel like there's a need to do it all?
Well, I love that. And I think that is such a good starting point. Like, well, not even just a starting point, but a foundation for
Yeah,
everything else that we do. Because I think as women, we have this pressure, whether it's in our role of motherhood, whether it's from our career, or just all of the things that we see on social media, we have this narrative that we are supposed to be able to do it
yeah.
all. And we just aren't. Like, we're limited, you know?
Yeah, there's one concept too I'd like to share. It's back in my corporate days, and it might apply for some women here, specifically if you're that three on the Enneagram. So I don't know if you can relate to this too, but sometimes it's almost like we feel like we've not hit success unless we're deeply struggling, right?
Mm,
Uh, I don't know if that resonates at all, but I was just like, unless I am totally at the end of myself and just pushing myself to the absolute limit, like that's not success. And like I would have people back in the day tell me, like a coworker, she's like, don't be a hero. And you know what? I needed to hear that. I really did, right? There's a little bit of a complex of what, again, what responsibility are we called to carry, and where are we called to surrender and trust in the Lord in
mm,
various different ways. But there's this concept, it's kind of like three circles, a smaller one, then a larger one, then a larger one. And then this first circle, it's our comfort zone. And obviously that feels really nice and cozy and comfortable. And we like to play around in that spot at times. And then outside of that is our stretch zone. We're doing something that's maybe not innate, challenging ourselves a bit. That is the sweet spot. That's where we want to grow. And then outside of that is overwhelm. So like you are pushing to the
mm,
limit. You are probably doing it to the point of where it's no longer healthy and it's going back to that harmful. And so sometimes as women, we can live in that overwhelm zone and we think that it's for good, and it's just not. It's causing more harm than good. And so that's just something I'd love to offer to listeners too. Like, what could it look like to play in that stretch zone, right? Where you are challenging yourself, you are doing amazing things, but in the healthiest way possible.
yes, I love that visual. I think that's such a good illustration because how often do we push ourselves to the limit and not realize how maxed out we are until we literally cannot go one single inch further? And we kind of like you said, like that's kind of praised, unfortunately, in our society is this hustle
Right.
culture, this mentality of like, oh, what are you doing? Just sitting around, or like rest is almost equated to laziness in our culture and these kinds of things where it's like there's not a healthy balance here. And I know balance is so elusive. But
Right.
I think we really, that's such a good point, because there is a sweet spot in there where we are being stretched, but we're not overextending ourselves to the point where we're not even effective anymore in our parenting, in our relationships, in our work, in our, our relationship with the Lord and our effectiveness for the kingdom. Like there is a sweet spot there. And I think this is where the boundary talk comes in so perfectly, because I think we just have this idea that we have to push more and more and more to get where we want to go, rather than trusting the Lord and going at his pace.
Oh my goodness, I'd love to share so much on boundaries. But maybe one more thing that could be helpful to add on to kind of how you're operating is that exactly. It's not
Mhm.
only like what is on your list for your goals, but how you're doing it, right? Because like there have been
Mm.
years, like some of my most successful years in business where I've gotten to the end of it. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like I not only achieved everything I'd set out to, but so much more. Like it was epic. But it's like, how do you feel at the end of it? Like, how did you show up for the
Mm.
people around you? Is that something that you're proud of? And so, as I goal set in these years moving forward, it's not just about what I'm doing, but how I'm doing it. So, maybe just another question to ask yourself as you kind of go through the day to day.
That's such a good point. So speak to that for us. Like, can you break that down? Like,
Totally.
it's not just about doing. It's like, how can we do this well? The things that we feel called to do, or the roles that we are in our current season, like, how do we create boundaries? And like, when I think about boundaries, I love this idea that they're not just like rigid and like a negative thing. I think a lot of people look at boundaries like a negative thing, but really it's a safeguard to help us be healthy and to do the things that we feel called to do well. So talk to us about boundaries. Tell us all the things so that we can do this well.
Absolutely. Okay. So, there are a couple like main points that might be helpful to just get settled in as we have a conversation.
If you're a small business owner, service provider, or creative that feels stuck, let me be the first to say I have been there. When I first started my business and podcast, I felt so overwhelmed. I was constantly hearing people talk about strategies for success, how often you should post on social media, and all kinds of other things that I needed to do in order to grow. And then I finally realized that I actually wasn't going to get anywhere if I didn't first have clarity about my brand, my message, and a vision for where I wanted to go and who I wanted to reach. Before I started working with Rebecca at Daisy Creative Co., I felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and honestly clueless about the best next steps I should take to grow. But she helped me clarify my vision, my goals, and branding to set me up for long-term success. And she's actually responsible for all the beautiful Bywords branding that you see today. So if you're a small business or you want to launch a podcast or land bigger brand partnerships, your brand should support your goals. Daisy Creative Co. is a boutique brand and website design studio that helps driven entrepreneurs like you show up with confidence and clarity. Their founder, Rebecca, helps you create a standout brand that builds community, creates impact, and supports your growth. She's got a special offer for Bywords listeners, so reach out today at www.daisycreative.co or on Instagram at daisycreativeco.
I love boundaries for a few different reasons, but one of them being that they point to the fact, this is a theme in the conversation today, right? That we are not God and we're not limitless. And that is a good thing. That's one of the reasons why they're so important. Also, I'd say that boundaries allow us to pursue what is great and avoid distractions that might keep you busy in what's good, but not perhaps create enough space to pursue that best yes. Right.
Mm.
And then one more I'll add to you is and you kind of noted at this, Hannah, boundaries provide freedom because they give us structure to focus on what matters most and then go ahead and be fully present in it. So those are a few different reasons for that woman who's like, oh, I hear what you're saying, but I'm uncomfortable, to hopefully give you that nudge to push you over the edge in the best way.
I love it. And I think that's so helpful because it's freedom.
Yeah.
Even when we look at scripture, like some people will say, oh, the Bible's just this list of rules and do this and don't do that. But it's out of God's love that he sets boundaries, because he wants us to be able to threat, not to box us in, but in his kindness. He sets up a space for us to live in the way that he designed us to, and to operate in a way that is in partnership and dependence on him, and without all the stress on ourselves to do it all and be it all. So I think how you said that freedom, I think is so key because some people can hear about boundaries and they're like, ugh, boundaries. Like, I don't want to talk about boundaries. Like maybe they're thinking about in an unhealthy relationship or work life balance boundaries, things like that. But could you maybe share a few examples? Because I know this idea of boundaries can almost seem lofty at times, but like, could you break
Yeah.
this down to day life? Like, how can boundaries, what kind of boundaries can actually help us thrive and live in freedom in partnership with the Lord in day to day life?
Yeah. And it's almost like thinking of the idea of boundary, it's not a bad word, right? Like
Yeah.
it's actually something good to be celebrated. So I think about, okay, let's go through a couple examples. So I think about boundaries. One of my favorite quotes is to let God's voice be the loudest in your life. And so I think about getting started in your day in the morning, right? Like what are in the his word, it says to just guard your heart and mind, right? It's be
Mm,
careful what's flowing from it. And so maybe a boundary that is a good example is I like to try to not check social media for a bit in the morning. It's just you're seeing everything everyone else has done and already the comparison and things like that seep in. So like
yeah.
it could be not doing something like that. It could be also thinking about it, like I see when I think about boundaries, I think about standards. Like, what are the standards you're setting for yourself? Almost,
Mm,
it could be it's something as simple as nutrition, right? Like, I'm not going to have my caffeine until I have my protein first, type of a thing. Like that is just a way of operating that you might have for yourself.
mhm.
Or I think about just being a business owner. It's just really interesting. There's so much freedom. Like maybe this is a great example. There's so much freedom in that, and that's super fun and beautiful, and a reason why a lot of people love to get into business for themselves in the first place. But I had to set a standard to say, this is a real like, gig, right? That I have to honor and honor well. So for me, a boundary I'd say is that my like personal things I'll try to schedule on like a Thursday or a Friday. And the front end of the week, the structure I have for myself is to really pour into clients, do content creation, things like that. That's a boundary that
Mm,
I'll put in place. So I could
yeah.
keep going. I'll pause for a second. Those are a few.
Well, I love that because I think boundaries can feel like such a big, overwhelming thing or like a hard conversation to breach. But I love how you're saying these are just simple ways to implement, like helper, like when you're bowling and it has like the bumpers on the side, it's
Yeah.
almost like that where it's like you're not shutting all these things out and being really extreme. And it's to help you. It's to help you reach the goal well and to block out the other stuff exactly like you said that would distract you or take away from the main thing. So I love the way you're breaking this down because it's very, I think when we can switch our perspective to see like, oh, boundaries are things that are actually kind of like the game plan to help me do what I want to do well and honor the right things, the right people along the way.
Exactly, right? Like there's so much noise. Like I've never been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, but I wouldn't be surprised these days if I went and did that if I was, right? Like there's so much noise and chaos and distraction that we have. And boundaries help to keep and cultivate the good stuff and kind of let the not so good stuff stay out as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say you're talking with a friend or a client who's starting at zero and they're
Yeah.
like, I don't have any kind of structure. Like maybe they're not as wired to the achiever perfectionist side, still want to do things well. Or, I won't even say that. Just like someone who's at the beginning of the process on either side. Maybe somebody like me who's striving for
Mhm.
perfection, achievement, that kind of thing. Or somebody who's like, I don't have any structure. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what to do. How do we start
Yeah.
implementing these things like from scratch, basically, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, so as we think about this, I'm going to go back to those 7 F's are a good place to start. So faith, family, fellowship, fun, function, which I say is career, finance, and fitness. So maybe think about like those different buckets of your life, if you will. But even above that, your faith, your family, and your work. And just, I'm going to share this big rock concept for those who haven't heard it, for those who have, it's just a good reminder we need to know. So there are three different buckets, one with big rocks, one with pebbles, and one with sand. So there are two sets of these three buckets. And the first one, this guy, he pours in the sand, then he pours in the pebbles, and then tries to pour in the rocks. And he can't pour them all in, right? There are a couple that are out. Same amount in a different set of buckets, pours in the rocks, then the pebbles in the sand. Everything fits, everything works. So that's just such a beautiful visual of when we put the main things as the main things, everything else falls into place. And so
Yeah.
just thinking like, Lord, how am I honoring my faith right now? Like, what does that look like? What's good? What is missing? And get really curious about that. And then think about like just to use the picture that God does in the Bible, right? With like weeds and rocks and things like that. And like, what is getting in the way of this? And how can I lovingly tend to that? Like, what does it look like to put different things in place so that that's not choking out all the good that God can and wants to do in life? So that's something to think about. What else would I say? I would, with doing all of this, doing it from a quarterly perspective can feel really good, right? Like if we try and go set
Mm.
goals, or if it's in perpetuity, that can be really stressful or feeling like, oh, this is, how am I going to keep up with this, right? But a quarterly is enough of going back to the stretch. It's enough of a stretch. But it's not a full year. So what could it look like to put certain boundaries in place for a 90-day period? Getting curious about that too could be helpful as well. I'm a big visual person, so then I like to break it down into like, well, how can I begin to practice this out daily? And we have post-its literally everywhere in our house. My 4-year-old, my 2-year-old, like everyone loves a good post-it.
I love
And
it.
just putting one simple question on that to ground yourself before you begin your day. How am I going to do XYZ? And then at the end of the day, right? Like how did I do at this? And saying what do you have to celebrate? And what did you learn that you can do better tomorrow because of anything that didn't happen the way that you anticipated?
I think it's such a good idea to start small like that and break it down into quarters or like a month at a time, couple months at a time, because then you get to kind of gradually grow into those boundaries as a part of your regular rhythm of life. And I think, like, for me, somebody who's very like, I get motivated and then I think I need to change my life in 90 days, like from 0 to 100. And it's just not sustainable long term. So I think it's great that you're talking about, like, okay, well, start where you're at. How can you, start something for a quarter, a couple months, test it out, build from there. It doesn't have to be this thing where all of a sudden you have no boundaries today and then tomorrow you wake up and you have 100 boundaries that you need to stick to because that's not realistic. And the thing is too, like, I have found myself in seasons where I try to do that because I, with good intentions, want to do it well. I'm like,
Oh,
you know what? I'm going to wake up at 5:30. I'm going to do my workout. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to have a perfect quiet time. Somehow my kids are going to be sleeping through all of that. And then I'm going to have this amazing day, where I'm super productive and all these things. And that doesn't always happen. So, can you talk to us about, like, when life happens, how
yeah.
do we pick ourselves back up and stick to this? Or maybe we have pushback from other people setting our when we've set boundaries. Like, maybe we've set a boundary that I'm going to be done with work at this time, but I'm
Mhm.
consistently being asked to do more or to stay longer or to serve more or to be used more or to what does that look like? How do we honor our boundaries while also knowing life is going to happen and people are going to be people?
Oh yeah, right? Like we can it's like so I don't know about you, but like I love dreaming goal setting on vacation. Right? You're on the
Mhm.
beach taking the sunset stroll. No, I'm personally I wish I had a passion for cooking. I do not. And not having to worry about anything for meals, right? Like it's wonderful. And honestly, that I gotta say, our life is just that's why I'm here, because we were on a beach, hand in hand beach sunset walk, my husband and I. He's like, okay, if you're going to do this coaching thing, like, let's do it. So there's something to be said about that. But there's something about dreaming and talking about something where life looks different than the everyday. And then you get thrown back into it. And it's like, okay, well, hmm, how do we live this out? And
Right.
I hear you. I feel you. I understand that. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things to help with that. One, I was talking with a dear friend and mentor, and she shared a really, really powerful idea with me that I think will resonate with a lot of people on here who are overachievers. Is that sometimes we like to get to that next level. It's almost like a self harm or infliction by criticizing or having some really
Mm.
negative self-talk and like, that's gonna get us to where we want to be next. Like it's so unhealthy and like so sad. But
Yeah.
she's ultimate healing, the ultimate wholeness is not found through criticism and correction, but through comfort and compassion.
Mm.
So if you feel your old habits picking back up, just maybe asking yourself, like, what would it look like to extend myself compassion right now? And just sit in that space, receive that, and then move forward from there. That would be one. I'd also say like getting curious about what is driving this need to overcommit, if you will, right? Like, is
Mm.
there something that you're trying to fulfill? Is there an insecurity that you're maybe trying to compensate from? One of my favorite questions to ask is, am I working from a place of worth or for it? Psalm 16:6 says that the boundary lines have fallen in pleasant places. And so liking to think like having gratitude for what he has given you, right? Like honor and celebrate what you do have. And then honestly, like honoring those limitations too, right? Like those are beautiful and in their own way. And just a couple other things. One more scriptures, Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then you will be able to test and approve what is God's perfect will, his good and pleasing will. And so thinking about like also what you are doing, it may look and feel different from others, right? Like we love to say, what are other people doing? But it's like, who, like, wait, what? Like, who are we allowing to direct our steps? That can be really interesting to just remember it's a good thing to be set apart. And then, because I'm trained as a coach and obsessed with coaching and what it can do for people, I'll end us with a coaching question. And this one is maybe asking yourself, Hannah, like, what does a healthy limit or a healthy boundary look like today? Because based on how we're feeling, circumstances, whatever, it may look very different day to day. And that could just be a good little thing to put in your back pocket, if you will.
I love that. I think that's so good. And I love that you brought up those scriptures because it is so interesting when you do look at scripture, especially the Old Testament, where God is leading his people and setting boundaries. Like he does this because he loves us and he
Mhm.
wants us to be able to effectively work in our limitedness. And I love that. Like it is a gift that it's not all up to us, that we have a God who invites us to lean on him. And so I think that is a really beautiful way to reframe this idea of boundaries, not to put limits on us, but in our limitedness, how can we show up well daily? And so I also love that question that you asked, like, what does
Mhm.
it look like today? One of my favorite things that I have learned in my years of kind of undoing my perfectionism achieving mindset is just deciding what's enough for today. Because I used to think my whole day is about productivity and it doesn't matter what happens. Like I have to just get everything done. And I'm going from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to sleep. And then, like we mentioned, at the end of the day, you're like, what did I even do? I was just running on a treadmill and I didn't even reach any finish line, you know? And so I love this idea of just being honest with yourself. Like, what is enough for today? What can I focus on today? That example of the rocks is brilliant. I love that illustration. So it's like, how do we keep the main things? And let everything else fall into place and like let some of the other things go. So I'm just so grateful for the way you really gracefully explain this concept that can become something that seems really, legalistic. And
Mhm.
so is there anything else you want people to know, like as they start thinking about and praying about what some healthy boundaries could be to set in their life for this season?
Yes, yes. Okay. And to add on to a couple things you had said there, I'm going to do a few different quick hits.
Yeah.
One of the tips that one of my longtime clients just loves so much, because we, have a to-do list a mile long. And then we're like, well, what if we just have five things on here? Right. And then she got to a point, she's like, you know what? Forget that. And like this girlfriend like gets things done. And she's like, let's just throw that in there and try like, what is one thing that I want to focus on today? But then and just start small, start small, and then it's like these kinda like the rocks and sand and pebbles analogy, just so much more will happen when we're putting the main thing. So what is the one thing but even before that, like, maybe taking a second to ask, I love these days where I'm like, "God, like, what would you have me focus on
Mm,
today?" And that's sort of an
yes.
all-encompassing question, right? Because he's gonna help you with those boundaries as well, isn't he? And it's just like, what does success look like today? What does it look like today? And it's gonna change depending on what is happening. But just going back to truth, right? Like in Isaiah, it says his ways are higher and better than ours. And get curious about like what does it look like for you to walk in the spirit today? Because that is the ultimate fulfillment, the ultimate success. Remember, stay connected to him daily, right? Like apart from him, we bear no fruit. So if you really
Yes.
care about doing, you really care about being fruitful, like let's do it in a way that lasts and in a way that matters. Um, and just no, just being reminded that we all have our good days and we all have our hard days. And there's so much that's coming out of both of those. And just remember that you're not alone. And just want to offer that love and care and support to that girl who is just being really tough on herself right now, right?
Mm,
Like his mercies are new each morning. He is going to carry some through to completion. If you feel like you're at the end of yourself, that's a good thing because you're going to lean into God like you never have before. And his
yeah.
glory and power is going to be on display through that in big and bold and beautiful ways.
That's so good. And I am so grateful for the work that you do to help all the women like me who have just gone years and years thinking there's only one way to be successful, and it's by burning yourself out or doing all the things and being everything to everybody and overextending, and that's just not God's best for us. And so I'm so grateful that number one, you have been on the journey in your own life. You've been faithful to the process. And now you have this fruit in your life that you're able to share with these other women who are coming to you and they're like, help me. And so thank you so much for being willing to share that with us today. And then where can everybody connect with you, get coaching from you, learn more from you from here?
Absolutely. Okay, so your first stop is going to be gracebasedchristiancoaching.com. There's so much good content on there. We've got a YouTube, we've got a podcast as well, Instagram. If you're like, oh my goodness, yes, let's do this like yesterday, you'll see an area to apply for a clarity call. Well, we'll talk more about where you are, where God wants you to be, and how coaching bridges that gap. It's just so special. It's just such a unique tool that there's nothing quite like it. And then also, if you want to join our email family, we have a really, really cool 15-minute workshop to help you make powerful progress fast. And that's just a great way to learn more and experience a taste of it too. So those are a few different things off the top of my head.
Okay, amazing. Well, y'all already know how I feel about coaching. Like, cannot say enough positive things about this experience. And so I will link all of those for you guys. But Alexandra, thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us today. I am so grateful for you.
Thank you, Hannah. You are amazing and such an encouragement light.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune in to another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and your support truly means the world to me. If you enjoyed this episode, would you leave a quick review? It really helps our community grow and reach more women. If you want more, you can shop my books, Waking Up, Living Open, and Love Is on Amazon, and be sure to sign up for my email list so you always get the latest news. I can't wait to chat again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on social media, and remember, I'm cheering you on.